Hey guys and gals, it's Dwayne again. I'm here for another lesson, and we're still on Principle 4 and Step 4 because they're two very important steps and principles in this process. Okay, I know this has went on for a couple of months now, but the inventory and working through some of these things, sifting through some of these things of our past so that we can have a better future, that's just all a part of it. Okay, and so this is lesson 13 this week, and we're actually a little over halfway through this program for this year, and we'll wrap it up in December, towards the end of December. But this week we're actually going to be talking about, the name of the lesson is Admit, okay? So this is lesson 25 and 26. And so, we only have about 50 or 51 lessons in the year, or actually 51 weeks. So, we do this and we enjoy doing it, and I know some of it's not easy, but it's also not easy to continue to let ourselves suffer through some of the things that are hurting us in our lives. Okay, so sometimes it's better to go ahead and look at those things a little closer instead of just letting them run around in our subconscious and in our hearts and not dealing with them. And we have some wounds, and so instead of just ignoring those wounds and letting them fester for years and years and decades of our life, we are going to see the wound, and we're going to learn how to heal those wounds so that we can heal and get more out of life, and get more out of the people around us, and people around us get more out of us, and that we all become healthier individuals. And so Principle 4, again, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. Remember those three things: to God, to ourselves, and to someone I trust. And this week we're going to be focusing on that someone we trust, okay? I know we had a lesson last month about sponsor. We went into great detail about that, and we said how we needed someone like that when we're doing our inventory, how important it is, so that we don't so that we've got someone to walk through the fire with us. But I know that sometimes it's a slow process, praying about it and finding that person, especially if we're not socially active or in a church or somewhere where we can kind of meet different people. And I know it's hard. It's easy for someone like me, who's an extrovert, who no one is a stranger, to meet people. And sometimes you meet them too often, really. And sometimes I wish I could close that circle in and basically, I guess what I'm saying here is sometimes when you meet a lot of people, you're not really paying attention to the closest circle in your life, because you're spending time with so many different people. And so there's a lot to be said about that smaller circle, and getting a tight circle, and really looking at that tight-knit network of friends, and realizing who really is your friend and who's just someone that's a superficial or distant relationship that's not really going to be within your influence or you and theirs. So there's a lot to be said about being an introvert, okay? I mean, you know who your friends are if you're an introvert, if you even have any at all. I know it's hard getting out sometimes, but look, so last week, and the week before, we talked about that little girl that was in the news. I guess it was in the 80s, that fell into that well, right? And it was a big deal. It was all over the national news. You remember that, and they drilled down, and they thought that they needed to get someone down there so that she wouldn't panic, and kind of hold her hand and be with her and talk to her and soothe her mind until they figured out a way to get her out without that well falling in on her, or without her doing something to herself that was going to make her fall deeper into the well, where it would be impossible to get her, and then where she would die. So we talked about that, and this week we're going to be talking a little bit more about finding a person in your life that you can trust, that you can confide in and talk to, and that can be in that well with you and help you get out of that well, okay, and help you to not fall back into that well when you get out, when you're still standing close to the edge. Basically, habits, as we talked about before, is a process, okay? I mean, that stuff doesn't just enter your head overnight. You repeat the same thing over and over and over and over, whether it's a habit or it's an emotion or it's judging someone or not forgiving someone or being vindictive against someone, or all these different things. Sure, they come out of something out of our hearts, but the more you do them, it actually creates neural pathways in your brain, and then it becomes a habit. It doesn't matter whether it's something to do with your personality or whether it is alcohol, drinking a six-pack every night or even a case every night, and or drugs or chasing women or chasing men if you're a woman, or whatever the case, whatever it is, these things become habits. And it's a difficult process to break a habit. And, we lie to others and lie to ourselves and all of this, and we go through this whole denial bit and all this kind of stuff. When we're trying to change these habits, it is not an easy process. It takes not only some prayer, it takes dedication, hard work, but it also takes you learning how to understand yourself better. Okay, sometimes other people see you and understand you better than you understand yourself, because you're in the moment, you're in whatever you're into, and that's all your brain is thinking about because it's all you've been doing for 20 years, and you're in that mode. And sometimes it helps for someone else to step in and help you, okay, a little bit, especially until you can get back on solid ground and change those habits and replace those habits and that time in your life with something else that is going to be more productive and helpful for you, okay, to become a better person, become more successful in your life, become more successful in your relationships, more successful in so many areas of your life. I mean, it's a God thing, okay? It's a God thing. I mean, God isn't all about judgment like some people try to portray Him. He's a loving God. He loves you. He doesn't want to see you suffering. He doesn't want to see you in pain. He doesn't want to see you causing pain in other people's lives, because He loves them too. So He wants to build you out of that, bring you out of that, okay, and make your life better. And therefore your whole community, your friendships, your relationships, your family relationships, friendships. I know I've said that, okay, so I'm repeating myself, but it's so important, okay? All these things are important and will bring you joy and life and peace down the road if you can get a handle on some of these things. So basically, a sponsor is someone that's going to help you get out of the well, but also stand beside you while you're still standing near that edge. Because when you're changing your habits, until you have changed them for years, you're still close to the edge of that well, right? Where you're going to fall right back in if you get triggered in some manner. And, there's moments where you're going to have strengths and there's moments where you're going to have weaknesses. We've talked about this repeatedly, about blazing the new trail and cutting the new trail out. And sometimes it's easier to get onto that well-worn trail that's already got the clear path and no limbs in your way. It's easy to fall down that path, even though the trail goes to a swamp, basically, with mosquitoes and things that try to eat you alive, alligators, and the other one will take you to some beautiful sunsets and beautiful panoramic views and this sort of thing. It's so easy, and that's what a sponsor is, someone that can help you, okay? So, we're going to be talking about finding someone that you can trust to help you get out of that well. Now, we're going to talk about, why admitting past wrongs, okay? Part of the step 4 was happy are the pure in heart was the verse, okay? Matthew 5:8, but also openly confess to myself and to God and someone I trust. Well, that brings you to the pure heart thing. It brings you to a light load. It brings you to peace, okay? It brings you to much peace. And the process can be a little painful getting to that peace, but it's better than just having pain the rest of your life, okay? So here we go. So one of the things is it cleanses the heart, okay? Talking to someone else about things that you've done that you don't want to talk about, that you don't even want to think about, it cleanses your soul. It brings life. And when it cleanses your soul, that means it brings life into your soul, okay? So number 2 is we lose that sense of isolation and loneliness. I mean, there's a lot to be said about making that human connection with someone else, especially someone who's been in a similar situation than you have. Being in loneliness, you can be around all kinds of people and still be lonely. Okay, that's the kicker to understand here. And when you admit some of these things to someone that you trust, once you find that person, and they share some experiences that they have been through that are very similar, then you actually are less lonely in the world, and that eases your burden, so to speak. Number three, we lose our unwillingness to forgive. As you confide in someone else, as you talk to them about some things you've done, okay, and you know that they're going to just hold that with you, and that you can share experiences, and they've done some things, it teaches you forgiveness. Maybe that's something that you've never learned because you feel like, you've done so many things, and nobody's ever forgive you. I don't know about your past, only you know that, but if you never experienced forgiveness, then it's something that is hard for you to forgive someone else if you don't really know what forgiveness is. It's one thing I can stand here and say God forgives you if you ask for forgiveness, but if the people around you haven't actually seemed to forgive you, or at least you haven't exposed yourself to them you haven't exposed yourself to them in a way where they can forgive you, okay? That can happen a lot of different ways, but if you haven't really experienced forgiveness with humans, so to speak, then it's hard for you to learn what that is exactly, where you can forgive others. So, this is part of that process, is when you will lose that unwillingness to forgive others because you're learning what that is when you confide in someone and you see that they don't judge you, they don't forgive you. And we're going to talk about the difference between judgment and a sponsor, and what the difference between judgment and actually just kind of holding you to the fire and making sure that you understand that you're still in denial or you're trying to regress. You got to know the difference there between someone that's trying to help you, a friend that's trying to yank you or keep you from falling back into that well or falling into the fire. You got to understand that's not judgment, okay? So you need to understand the difference between someone who's throwing rocks and stoning you, because sometimes that person trying to yank you out of the fire, you're burning, right? So you think they're the ones burning you when they're the ones trying to pull you out, okay? So I'm going to talk some more about that in a minute, about knowing the difference, and don't let your mind fool you between someone trying to pull you out of the fire and someone that is actually trying to stone you to death, like the people did with that woman that time that we had the lesson about. All right, number 4, we lose our inflated ego and our false pride, okay? You see a lot of people with egos and pride, and you think that's a strong person, but it's really just an inflated ego, and it's a false sense of pride, and that they will, and all of us have that at some point in our lives if we don't all have it to a degree. I mean, they'll crumble, when they get hit with this or that. I mean, it's not real strength. It's a false strength that easily will crumble, and fall. So you got to know the difference between this. But, when you confess to someone and you build a solid relationship with a friend or sponsor that you trust, it'll humble you when you start talking about some of these things. It'll humble you, but it also will empower you. And you need to know that both are capable, because you'll be a much stronger person in a lot of ways when you talk and get all this stuff out of your system. And you get a regular program where not only it's just a one-time deal, it becomes part of your personality, okay? It becomes part of you. It becomes you, basically. And so, number 5, we become more aware of denial as its power over us disappears. So you may be still in this program, and you may have been with me ever since the beginning in January. You may have been attending some other Celebrate Recovery program or some kind of other 12-step program or whatever, but you're still not fully aware of when denial is attacking you, okay? You still do this, and you still blame it on someone else from your past, and you still do this, and you say, well, the liquor store is right next to my house, or you're not taking responsibility and you blame it on someone else. And you can't attack a problem if you always blame it on someone else, because you can't go to that liquor store and burn it down, okay? You've got to look at yourself, and you've got to, not in a day not in a way that's going to destroy you. I'm talking about a way that it's like there's a set of steps over here, okay, and then there's the well over there, and you got the opportunity to either walk up the steps and get to a better place, or you get the opportunity to fall into the well. But your habits in your mind, okay, that they have done a certain thing for a certain length of time, and that is to go over here to the well and fall into it and not be able to get yourself back out properly, okay? You might spend a week or two in there and come out for a couple of days, and then you fall right back in there again. But the steps is the better route, okay? They lead to a better place, and that's what I'm talking about. Being aware that when you walk up to that decision, whether you got the steps on your right or you got the well to fall into on your left, you are aware that, well, yeah, I'm the one that wants to fall into the well, but I'm also the one that's going to make the choice to go up the steps. And then if you got a sponsor standing next to you, he's there to say, hey, you remember what that well did you to when you fell into it before, okay? You remember that, and you remember all those things. It's not a judgment thing. You understand that. It's not a judgment thing. And he tells you, or she tells you, the steps, the stairs, that's the better route, okay? That's the route you want to go. And then we say, no, I want over here the well, I want the well. I want to fall into the well, or I want to fall into the ditch, or I want to do the same old things I've been doing for the last 5 or 10 years. A good sponsor is the one that's strong enough to say, no, we're not going to do that. We're gonna go up these steps over here, and I'm going to be with you. I know you've got a little weak spot right here. I'm going to be the one that's going to be with you and help you go up these steps, okay? All right, so number 6, we begin to believe in ourselves again, okay? We begin to believe in ourselves again because, like I said, confessing, admitting, overcoming denial, overcoming all these things that have kept us in that well all these many years, once we get back on solid ground and start doing something with our lives, and we become happier and we have more peace, we begin to believe in ourselves more. We begin to believe in ourselves more, and we don't need some of those old crutches we used to fall back on, okay? We become stronger. So, here's what we gain by admitting our wrongs to God, to ourselves, and to someone we trust. Of course, obviously, the order of that should be admit to ourselves, because if we can't first admit to ourselves, how can we admit to God? If we can't admit to ourselves and then to God, then how can we admit to someone we trust? So that's the order that should be in. So first of all, the Bible promises healing, okay? James 5:16 says, confess your sins to each other and pray for each other so that you may be healed. And notice it says confess to each other so that you may be healed, not so that you may be judged. Judgment falls on you. It's kind of like karma in a way. Judgment's going to fall on you, whether anybody does anything or not, okay, or judges you. So confess to each other so that you'll be healed, so that you'll be judged. And remember, God forgave you when you talked to Him about the situation, okay? He forgave you, and He's your number one priority. So confessing it to others is about healing and being released from the bondage of guilt as well, okay? So first you, then God, then someone you trust. All right. Number 2, admitting gives us freedom. Guilt keeps you enslaved and it slows you down. So Psalm 107:13-14 says, they cried to God in their troubles and He rescued them. He led them from the darkness and the shadow of death, and He snapped their chains. These things hold you down. I mean, they hold you down. They enslave you. These things, these habits, they enslave you. And you're a slave because when you try to get away, the master comes and he whips you for running away, okay? At least for a little while. Even your friends that are doing the same thing, it's like that crabs in the barrel psychological thing that happens. Once you crawl out of the barrel, right when you're at the top about to escape, all your friends are trying to pull you right back down by saying things like, oh, you think you're better than us, or, come back and be with us, or why would you leave your friend, and they whimper, 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 and play on your on your guilt and so forth. But all they want is a co-conspirator for their habits and their things that they're stuck in. And once you get strong enough, you can come help and pull them out of the fire as well. So you can think about it that way, to get away from the guilt of leaving them for a little while until you get stronger yourself, okay? Psalm 32, 3-4 says, when I did not confess my sins, and this is David, and let me tell you, this guy had some major, he had some major sins, he really did. And sometimes when you get a little power, you get tempted more than other people do. Things are presented, to you that otherwise would not be presented to you. I mean, think about when Satan was tempting Jesus, okay? I mean, and we're definitely no better than Jesus. I mean, and the devil knew what, Jesus' potential was. He knew he was the Son of God. He knew he had the world right up under his fingertips, and that he could be a king and have the whole world right there, and not just be some humble, barefooted Jew, so to speak. They were walking around with 12 buddies. I mean, and so he knew what the temptation was, or he knew the human side through his mother. He still had that flesh, Jesus did, even though he was God in the flesh. But Satan knew what buttons to push, and certainly, Jesus succeeded every time in that, and Scripture is there for a reason. It's a good thing to use to help keep those temptations away. But so David was saying this, when I did not confess my sin, I was worn out from crying all day long. My strength was completely drained. And David became aware. He was in denial. I'm going to have an example of that here just shortly. But he was in denial for a while about some things. But he became aware of them, and he overcome his denial, and he has a sponsor to help him do that. All right, the third thing is we gain support. When we admit to other people, we gain a network of support. If you have one sponsor, two sponsors, a group of 3 or 4 sponsors that you trust, you've got a tight friendship there and a bond that you'll have the rest of your life, hopefully. And so, the old verse said, iron sharpens iron, okay? You sharpen each other, okay? And so, and also a good friend or a couple of good friends has your back. It's just a good, powerful thing to know that. So you need to have a good grasp on what that is. So the sponsors, like when we start saying those things like, it's not so bad, okay? It's not so bad. What I did wasn't so bad, or they deserve it, or you get resentful or jealous, or, you try to get revenge on someone, and some of these things are just eating you up inside that fuel, that take all your energy that could be spent doing more positive things. A good sponsor is there to hold you accountable about that, okay, and to say, remember that you're standing near that well, you're fixing to fall in again. Remember, you don't want to stand near the well, you want to go up the steps, okay? That's what a good sponsor hopefully will do, and that's why we're going to talk about more on how to select that person in a few minutes, okay? Well, I'll say a few minutes. We're going to have something for the lesson next week, and so I don't want to spill all the beans this week. So right now, I just want you to know that, I'm praying for you, and I hope you're praying for me, and that I hope you're getting something out of these lessons. And I hope you understand, I'm not the guy that's throwing stones at you, okay, even though, Satan's telling you, hey, that guy's throwing stones. I'm the guy that's saying, hey, you're standing over here next to this well, you fall in, and it's not a good place. It's a lonely place. It weakens you. It's dark. It's cold. It's very painful. And the climb might take a little work to get out of that well, or whatever you have fallen into. It might take a little while to get out of there, but the better route is to go up these steps over here, okay? To get on a different path and to heal those wounds. You know, that's where I'm coming from. It's not from a place of judgment. So don't listen to that, you know, ugly rascal, okay? As far as Satan telling you that I'm judging, because trust me, I'm not judging you at all. I'm not judging you at all. So, so anyway, I hope you have a very good week. I know it's getting hot, and with all this rain, the grass has been growing incredibly at a fast rate. And so, but I hope you have a good week, and I hope you got something out of this lesson. And I will see you next time.